Hey there, welcome back to the shop. This is me. This is a rusty hardtop. This is some new steel. They need to be friends. Let's get to it. So starting to chip away at the hardtop. These panels do come off obviously. Just kind of typical 18 gauge rolled seam on the bottom. Kind of comes around. It's supposed to have a lip that kind of tapers up here. Pinched rolled edge on the bottom. If you look at this side, here's a better view. It does have a kind of bracing rail here that clamps to the tub. This side actually isn't too bad, needs a little bit of patchwork on the inside. Here's a better view on this side. That whole lip is gone. It was rusted out, as well as there's obviously some pretty significant rust on the sheet metal. So we've got to cut out both the sheet metal around the outside as well as rebuild this ledge. What I'm going to start with is most likely start working to rebuild this lip using the other side that's good as a template. You can kind of build it upside down and get the radius right. You can kind of flex this corner all sorts of shapes and sizes when that lip is gone. Obviously this top is pretty stout, but down here you can work it every which way. So starting with that lip should get us in the ballpark. Then we can cut out this sheet metal kind of up to either midway up or possibly go up above this rail so we can tack it on there again like factory using the spot welds. My guess is it's probably where we'll end up. There is an air gap up here for the windows. So we'll probably end up cutting up to there and back to somewhere in this vicinity here. Work it all the way around. But first up, let's get cutting and bending some steel and see if we can rebuild this fella. He is a little interesting where it's got multiple lips, so I think we're going to have to build it in two pieces and weld it together. This top one kind of has a weird 45, and then as you look as it goes back, that 45 just, she wanders away. They decided they didn't want it anymore. So we're going to have to deal with kind of a little bit of a strange compound-ish bend there. I think we can get her done, but we'll play around with some steel. Worst case is, you got some steel in the scrap bucket. Best case is, we'll make us a new lip. So let's get to her. So no like metal break here, but we can kind of make do with a couple pieces. These happen to be kind of cutter blades. I just got them propped up in the vise here. If you do get them lined up and work the steel in, you can kind of make a break out of it. We're just going to try and break that lip over. Well, that'll do. Pretty close to the angle. We'll keep tweaking it. One of those things. Work with what you got, do the best you can, get her close, and just keep kind of bending her. So took the piece over back to the plasma cutter, nibbled off this flange to shorten it up a little bit, closer to what the length is. It's a little easier to bend, less metal. So nibble that off to get it a little bit closer. Marked off. We need about 6.5 inches or so before that bend starts. We'll start radiusing it here. The only quirk is I need to remember to do everything basically upside down because I'm making a mirror image one. If I laid it in there and marked off 6.5 inches on this side and started curving this way, that's making one for the side that's already good, so I've got to remember to do it upside down. Well, through the magic of video, it is the next day. As you can tell, pulled the hardtop off, disassembled it, took the fiberglass cap off, took the sides off. It's also a little bit chillier today. It's about 35 degrees out, so a cold spell came back in. But took the hardtop sails off, a little bit easier to get a handle on exactly what dimensions we need, exactly what we're dealing with, and a little bit better on test fitting these corner pieces. So we can swap out. So far, our cardboard aided design is doing pretty good. Radius is sitting pretty good. We will have to trim and bend this flange down. It does have a little bit of a carry, but otherwise pretty good. It doesn't have to be exact. You know, it's just kind of there to meet up with this flange and give clearance for this lip. But if you look, it basically has to match up with that outer flange in a nutshell. Basically, you need to keep a radius for a piece of 18 gauge, so it's got to slide out just a skosh. There's a couple bolt holes in here that we have to make sure we have clearance to hit. You can kind of see where they ride there. There's one right about here, and there's one right about here. So we'll have to make sure we got clearance for those bolt holes. But otherwise, our next piece that would lay on top is actually pretty decent as well. We'll have to work on the hardtop to get it to sit just right. But basically, you come up off of this side panel and meet up again. You need a 18 gauge thickness there. Come around, and then it actually scoots out a little bit, so this rides flush because it's got this lip. But on the back there isn't a lip, so there's an overhang. So this rail comes out just a little bit compared to here. But all in all, radius is looking pretty good. So next step, we'll probably just do off camera because it's cold and dirty. We've got to basically hit this with the grinder and sandblaster, get this kind of cleaned up, see what we're working with. And then we'll probably start by patching up that post to get us a good common point to work from. And then we can work in what needs to get plucked out and get those rail flanges tacked in there and made it up and kind of coming around to give us some shape. So I'll be back in a bit, and hopefully with a mildly cleaner hardtop. Well, back to the indoors. I got both hardtop sides blasted clean. This side isn't too bad. Got original sheet metal that comes back to here. You can see the vertical line where it was patched once before. A little bit of rust that progressed a little further up, just a real tiny pinhole here and a couple back. So rust, even after it was patched once, worked its way forward. We're going to nibble that patch back out, see what we're working with. It blew out further up here, so this has got to get nibbled out. Same deal. Unfortunately, this square kind of, I guess it'd be a C pillar, got blown out as well, so we're going to have to patch that bottom part. This inner rail, you can see how it sits here, kind of rides up near the tub, and then has a lip to clearance over the top and support the sheet metal. It's gone, so we're starting to fabricate that. That was kind of the beginning of the video. We got a good start there. We got to nibble out some of this patchwork. Again, you can kind of barely see the seam above there, so that'll all come out, and that'll be this side. There is a little bit of work up top. Same deal on this rear pillar where the ambulance doors go. Generally pretty tucked away. There's that crossbar that comes bolts here, but we're going to have to patch that and deal with a little bit of this radius where the sheet metal wraps around. A lot of pinch welds on here, which is why they rot out quite so much. Same on this side, top corner, again where that crossbar met, just trapped moisture, rotted and blew out. A little bit of a pinhole here, might be able to just plug that guy, but my guess says we're going to have to do the corner wrap anyway, so probably going to get a new patch, just a little plug on the corner there. Same deal, not as bad on this side, but same problem. Rotted out in this corner, a little bit on this bottom. This one was actually patched once before. Probably going to have to repatch it just to address some of the stuff on the inside here. Get rotted out again, and there's just some things that it's just easier to cut it out and patch. From the good old 70s, I had a CB radio antenna. We're going to have to patch that hole. This gives you a better view of what the lip should look like though. All cleaned up. Luckily that side's pretty good. And kind of like the other side, just this whole section kind of just rotted out. Not nearly as bad as the other side. This one was not patched. This is all still original. But you can see it kind of walked its way up to a little further. You know, we're partway up into this window, where if you look at the other side, it stopped kind of at this window bar, somewhere about here. So we got another 6 inches or so that we're probably going to have to deal with on this side. Otherwise, it's a little bit better. I think we're going to start on this side. It's the worst of the bunch. I'm going to peel that off, get it on the little blocky benches over there, and we'll start nibbling away and see what we got and start to work, most likely start to work this pillar. It's going to give us our working point to go and get that flange back in, and then we can wrap the steel back around it. So we'll get that set up and get you back on there, and let's get to it. And one last step to kind of jig things up before we really start ripping in her. Took a piece of just aluminum angle that I had on hand. Came straight up off of this lip on the tub. Just clamped it in there. Gives me another kind of working surface, because obviously this hardtop, you can kind of wiggle it and push it around, especially with this corner blown out, and no support anymore. So you can see it naturally wants to sit out. It needs to be back there so that surface comes up, and it needs to be in, so we get a nice straight edge up there. So that'll give us something to clamp on, give us another datum to work off of. So we can rip this nasty corner out, start building that down, and build that flange across. And then we'll at least have kind of everything meeting up. And we can start finishing up that flange, and then we can kind of continue wrapping the sheet metal around. But at least now we got a good jig kind of coming vertical off of this door seam, because it is where the ambulance doors go, so you do need to have that pretty straight. And it'll just give us something to work off of both directions. And we'll have some vertical measurements to work from off the chassis. So that should be all we need to really start ripping into this corner, peeling her back, and start putting back some fresh. Away we go. Marking up a few spots to nibble. Trying to save what we can. You know, the more you can keep the original metal, the better time you're going to have. We'll see if it's too thin, but we'll start with less. Less is more. Well, now that we've got a little bit of working room, we can see how this fellow fits up. So this is the piece that would go up against the outer bodywork. We can kind of tuck it in behind that lip. They had them overlapping basically. There's a step. So he actually tucks in behind there pretty well. Needs a little bit of a nibble and needs to get flattened out just a little bit. But otherwise, sitting pretty good. The radius is, as we tried on the tub, actually pretty close. Come on, let go. So, as we chip away, that's actually a pretty good start to getting that support kind of back together, and we'll meet up at the corner. Feeling pretty good there. So I got this guy kind of sitting in place. Poked a couple bolt holes to hold it. It's got a nice clearance against the tub. It is tucked behind this step in the flange, sitting pretty good there. So that's all looking pretty good. Got it trimmed to length. It is sitting back just about a width of the sheet metal. This top one has to come down and have a fold, so you can't have it flush. It's got to be about the thickness of an 18 gauge push back. So that's pretty good. That gives us clearance all around. Sitting pretty good in general. Working a little bit on the outer sheet metal. So just have basically a piece of 18 gauge. Got a brake started. It does have that rolled lip on the bottom. Don't have it cranked all the way, but it's just there to stiffen things up. It should, kind of thinking right, nibble it here. It'll keep it kind of on the flat panel. Then you only have to radius a shorter piece of metal. It'll give me more to work from of the OEM. What we're going to have to do is nibble this end off and break a 90-degree here, which will let me kind of start to work on that rear pillar here. I've got to kind of see if I can press out a curved piece there, so that's where I kind of skipped over to just working this a little bit. But otherwise, this piece gives me a little bit. I do need to nibble this forward, so I do have a little bit extra, but we're going to get this guy, yeah, it's going to be pretty good. We'll get this guy nibbled and get a 90-degree break in it. That'll give us this back corner, and that'll help us work this radius around. Well, new day, sun shining. Nice to work with the doors open. Not quite toasty yet, about 40 degrees. But day 171 here, so chugging along. So starting to chip away, working on extending this pillar down to the bottom where it's supposed to meet. Took a little bit this morning, had a scrap of whatever 3/4 inch strip of 18 gauge left from cutting off, I think from this flange actually. So kind of bent it to match the flange that we need to make, so that's pretty good shape. It's kind of like a paper dowel, but a little more sturdy. But that gives me an idea of the dimensions of the brake that I need to get into that. Nothing too complicated, there's a better view. So we're going to start there, cut a piece of steel whatever that is, 5 inches by a couple inches deep. Get that bent in. That'll tie in this pillar down to this flange, and we'll start to get this thing back hooked together. Let's get bending some steel. Alrighty, I feel a little bit of hammer work. Got our nibble back. Sits pretty good there, sits pretty good there. Folded this little tab over. I'm not sure exactly how it was. Both sides are gone. I know the sheet metal rides up to about the lip and then comes down on the back, so it's not super critical anyway, but I just folded that tab back. Ties into this plate coming across. And if we look on the inside, we've got that lip set up here, so the other piece will fold over. You can see this little tab flipped out where kind of the top part is. So next up we have to bend this multiple radius, so it kind of comes here, wraps around, comes around, makes this pillar, and then has this flange here. So we're gonna have to try and see if we can get that bent up in some way, shape, or form, and get it for this last 5 inches or so to fill in there. Then we can tack in this last piece here, and then we can wrap the skin around. Well, after a bit of hammering, bending, grinding, hammering, bending, grinding, ended up with a piece kind of like that. Not too shabby. Unfortunately, we get to make another one for over there, but at least we have an idea of what we're in for. But if we tuck it in there, sits pretty good. Hard with one hand, but gives us a flange that we're going to bend around. It'll meet up at the bottom, tucked around. Bends match pretty well, and if we tuck it up, we'll sit pretty good there. We'll kind of clean up that edge coming down off of this guy as we get it in there. And I've got a square set up with a little bit of a lip there to get that square coming down off of this face. So when we get it in there, we got a nice flush piece to mount our skin against, which will give us a good contour. So we'll get that cleaned up. We'll get a little of the rest of this cleaned up and start tacking it all in there, and that'll give us some working space to get started on the skins. Well, got this pillar pretty good. Ended up pretty good. Got to do some finish welding, but we'll do that off the vehicle. We can lay it on the bench and have a little easier access instead of crawling in the tub. But otherwise meets up pretty well with this bottom flange. Bottom flange is tacked on. Bottom flange comes around. Just got a little tack over here in case we got to wiggle around to get the other one in. But sitting pretty good there. So I think we're going to pop the top off, throw this over on the bench, clean up some of the welds, but otherwise feeling pretty good there. It's nice to have kind of a solid corner again. Well, I think this is day 3, 4, 5, something, working on the hardtop panel. It is a fiddly piece, just with all those corners meeting together, and there's all those kind of bent flanges. Threw the hardtop back on. That was a fun little exercise. Been having to kind of take the side top on and off, but need the hardtop to really test that back door fit. So we put the old broom to service. It's doing the deed, kind of helps. Looks kind of funny with the hardtop hanging there. But it does let me take the sail panel off, yet kind of get everything really nice and square. So plugging along. I'm going to start getting the sheet metal on the outside in. If I flip this fella up, you can get a little better view of that inner. Turned out pretty good considering this was all kind of gone. You know, anything shiny is basically new metal. So I was able to mimic that bent radius, come down, meet up with that bottom flange. We got the corner here. So that'll do. I know it is not correct on the length. I have extra on this end. I need to work from. I need to work from this corner because of that break on it. That's going to be a driving factor. Now I can at least slide him in there, and that'll give us. Bring this fella around. There we go. So if I slide him in here, I got to nibble that corner a little bit. So if I bring him in there, that should give me a idea of where I need to be on the other side. That's actually not bad. So that straight edge, can you see? So if I run a straight edge down, let's go this way. So just if I run a straight edge down this, it does meet up with that guy. So it's sitting pretty good that way for just the first fit. Obviously we've got to catch that so when the radius works its way around, it'll meet up with its friend over here. You won't have a whole lot of wiggle room. But other than maybe a little nibble out of that guy, it's sitting pretty good. Oy, 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 oy. This little thing does not get any lighter. So that's that radius I'm trying to mimic. If you look, you can see my initial rough drawing, just based on kind of matching dimensions on the other side. A little bit low, needs to come up just a touch. So that's about where we want to be. So we're going to key off of that same corner. I'm going to see what this shape looks like. It's not too bad. Technically it probably could come more that way to be closer to that kind of more that's a bit closer to what the factory angle is. Let's go snag a template. So good old Mountain Dew to the rescue. This is the factory piece falling in the cracks. So my outer point here is looking pretty good. Dimension up there is looking pretty good. Probably that line I made is going to be my winner. So not that guy, not that guy. It's going to be the one in the middle. That'll be pretty close. Like I say, mine's going to be a little bit more trapezoidal versus a round radius. I mean, it'll kind of end up a little bit that way as you break it, but it's going to be a little bit closer to that square. And I lost a pin cap. I need a new one the right way. That corner, that one's got to go up. And I get her to sit this way. It would make my life easier. I left that guy in case I needed him, but he's kind of in the way. So I think he's gone. So got her pinched in. over. Looking pretty good on our line, so that's good. There's one. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pinch this guy like that, which is going to be interesting. But he is also in the open. Oop. Dum-ba-dum-ba-dum. Just need a little nibble there. Well, might be able to So she's a little bit squarer than factory, but I don't think it'll be a big deal. But got a nice little nibble there. Let's go put her back in the panel. So before we tuck her in there, hopefully the last time, I'm going to poke a couple holes for spot welds to hold this to that final pillar. Don't have to be perfect, but it is kind of nice to get them sort of even. Ta-da! Beats drill. Otherwise, radius is looking pretty good. Kind of cleaned it up. Touched up a few of the spots where it seamed up, but feeling pretty good there. Get this guy tucked in and clamped, pushed up tight. Get a little bit of wiggle. So tuck those spot welds on. It's sitting nice and flush here. Matches up pretty well here. Corners kind of nicely all together. It'll get a little bit of seam sealer just to tidy everything up. And that other piece of rail is going to go in here to fill up this gap. But sitting pretty good there. Next thing we're going to have to do is start working this around, keeping everything flush. Bring that around and meet up here. We're going to have to nibble off a little bit at the end as we get closer. We can figure out what that distance is. So threw her back on for the 1800th time. This post is sitting nice and flush. This is riding pretty good. This has just enough clearance for what you're looking for. Don't have anything to shove behind there. But basically it's not resting against the tub, which is what you're looking for. This is actually sitting nice and flat. So we're looking pretty good in that direction. I'm actually probably going to leave it on the tub to work this around. It'll give me another dimension to kind of keep in check. This is pretty stable. but we'll be able to measure our clearances around the tub, get that nice and even, and as we work around we'll catch that corner. Everything bolted down actually just helps stiffen up the whole panel, and it's just a little less awkward. Back on for the 18,652nd time. Feeling pretty good after a lot of welding, waiting, grinding, waiting, welding, waiting. Sitting pretty good. This side, this back part, kind of big flat panel, turned out pretty good. This radius laid pretty good as well. I actually ended up taking the grinder, gave that a little bit of a radius as well. I'm going to leave this at a sharp angle. It kind of matches the doors coming across straight, and then this radius just gives it a little more, fits with the curves of the vehicle. But otherwise, came around the corner pretty good. This radius is sitting nice on the tub. This flange is sitting pretty nice. There is a little bit of a divot here. I wasn't able to get the panel clamps to hold that straight apparently. So there is a little bit of a hump, an inward hump there, which is all better than an outward one. You can kind of work with that. It is going to need a little bit of mud to fill that in. That's why that weld isn't ground flush. You can see it's still kind of rough versus on the back here. You can get it pretty flat. All in all, I'll take it. I am not a metal worker by trade or anything. This is my first kind of major metal work I've done. Patch panels and things in kind of heavier gauge. So first time around, this is a pretty finicky corner with all the bracing and kind of the radiusing. So all in all, not feeling too bad about it. Everybody's a newbie once, so this is my newbiness. But like I say, it should be able to put a little bit of body filler in there to flatten that out and get it kind of nice and straight. It was kind of wonky to begin with up here. This panel has kind of a divot here for some reason. It had mud when I stripped it. I'm not sure how you get that dimple out because it's right under the bracing. It may have taken a thump at some point. I'm not going to mess with that. It's going to get a little bit of a skim coat there as well, unfortunately. And there is a bit of a oil can left here as well, probably from that dimple. But as I mentioned, I should be able to brace that where it needs to be once I get that inner brace back in, which should take most of that out. We'll see as we go. But time to see if we can fit this little feller in his home and make him friends. That looks good enough. Send it. Oh, where are you supposed to be? There you are. That's good enough. So sitting pretty good. It's pushed down where it needs to be. It was clipped in against that rail, so feeling pretty good there. Yeah, radius sits pretty good all the way around. When it sits where it needs to, it's got a little bit of a... The fitment is right here to bring that panel in. I think what I'm going to do is tack this corner so I can work it. It wants to drop under the rail. We can start to work it over. If we need to, we can nibble that tack back off. And then I think I'm going to trim it back once it's in place, because it's just a little bit hard to guess where it needs to fit along this rail this way. So I'm going to bring her in, try and tack this corner. I've got it marked where the length needs to be. And theoretically we should be able to work it around, which would be good. But if I jiggle this guy, get him to sit where it's supposed to here instead of dropping under, then I should be able to work that over, and I think we'll be in good shape. But first things first, let's get a tack on there. Well, pulled it off so I could get access to the upper and the lower. Sitting pretty solid. Everything seems pretty good. I'm going to start to nibble away at this to get it back to where it should be. Going to be a little bit of everything to get her back, but we'll get it distanced. Well, get out of the way, finger. Well, we got her all cleaned up, welded up, cleaned up. Spot welds are tacked. Everything's pretty good. It's going to get seam sealer kind of around the edges, which will tighten, kind of clean everything up the last little bit. Otherwise, looking pretty good here. One last little bit, I was on the fence, but I think I'm going to knock it out. There's a flange here and a flange here, and it's supposed to go all the way around. When I bent it, I couldn't get that to wrap down, so I did end up throwing a piece in the stretcher. I'm going to nibble what I need out of that and use that flange in this last little bit to get the flange all the way around. That is how it is on the factory, so in for a penny, in for the pound. We'll nibble that out, weld that in, and then I think I'm going to hit it with the blaster just to clean everything up, see what we got. Well, gave her a quick rip through the blasting cabinet. Came out pretty good. So everything from that seam back, we had to remake, about 4 inches up. This whole flange back here, where it mates up to the arch, was gone. This whole section was gone. So all that was remade. Not the simplest part, came out pretty good for a newbie, so pretty happy with that. Kind of like the main one, there are a couple little gaps here and there that will need seam sealer, which is fine. Got that lip radius on there, so pretty happy with that. If we spin her around, on the outside, again, came out pretty good. So about 4 inches up back here, and then about 2.5 inches all the way up to about that window pillar was all new. Like I said, there is a little bit of a dimple. It is going to need some filler. Otherwise, came out pretty good. Pretty happy with that. So one last check. Going to throw her on back on the tub. Well, did a little work off camera. This episode is getting a little bit long, but in general, hardtop side, passenger side turned out pretty good. Driver side turned out pretty good. A couple little spots where I got a little bit of a inset there. I couldn't use my panel clips to keep things nice and flush because there's a support rail, kind of like I worked on the other side. So I didn't get this side perfectly flat because the patch piece was only like 1 inch long. Easy enough to straighten out with just a real little bit of filler to make it nice and smooth. These big flat panels are kind of interesting little buggers. I also got done a little bit of patchwork up in the top corners. Will you stay there? I think you will. Where this support rail came across, it held moisture in between this panel and this panel, so it was rotted in between both of those. So I had to kind of do a little bit of metal origami to make some patch pieces to fit in there. Same way on this side, same deal, pinch seam, kind of just traps moisture. But all in all, inner rail came out nice, so we're nice and clean on the inside here. This side turned out pretty decent as well. Pretty happy there. So the back is all tidied up. Doors are sitting pretty good. I had to finagle the hinges a little bit. Come on. But all in all, door seams are sitting pretty good. So next up, we're going to work on those door lowers. We got to cut those off, redo them, but now we've got a nice, good, clean pallet to work on. We've got a consistent opening, and we can work to fit those doors in nice and tight. Oh. Well, thanks for riding along. It's been a while since I camped out on the old back porch of the FJ. All in all, pretty happy with progress. Kind of getting closer and closer to paint. Like I say, I got to work on the bottoms of the doors. Got to do a little bit on the windshield still. Then there's just going to be a lot of primer and block sanding. Like I said before, I'm kind of new to some of the body work. This isn't my day job or anything like that. Got to start somewhere. Everybody's a newbie once. It was kind of funny watching the series with Alex Taylor and her dad, Dennis Taylor. They're doing a 55 Chevy. They're trying to do a drag car that'll get into the 6s. So if you haven't seen that series, it's actually pretty good. He's an interesting guy to watch. Lots of experience, and he's kind of the same way where it's like, how do you learn how to do stuff? You just kind of do it and learn through experience, trial and error. His saying is, if anyone else can do it, I'm pretty sure I can figure out how to do it. It's kind of the same way. Cut some metal, form it in there, make it happen. If someone else can make it happen, you can make it happen. As you can see, I don't have any real special tools here in the shop either. Welder, the plasma cutter is nice to have, but you don't need it. And I don't even have a metal brake, so a lot of it's just kind of beating on things with a hammer. But anyway, time for dinner, time to get cleaned up, and looking forward to knocking out the last bit of the metal work. This one was a little bit of a marathon, but it feels good to get her done. And then we are another week closer to getting piston rings. Today's the 5th. They should be in probably the 23rd, 24th. So we might actually be throwing some paint before the piston rings come in, which is fine. The engine's tucked away, and the body's got to come off before then anyway. So anyway, thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.